Snow was falling thick that night, each flake turning the world into a white silence. The prairie stretched endless, ghostly, and bare, and the only sound was the wind keening through the cottonwoods, like the sorrow of some old spirit. At the edge of that wide emptiness stood Yuma Hart's ranch, its barn lamp swaying in the storm, a single light holding back the dark. Yuma himself stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, a man whose 30 years felt doubled by grief. 2 winters had passed since the grave closed over his young wife, and in that time, his ranch had become less a home than a husk. He was about to turn in when he saw her. A figure trudging through the snow, half bent against the wind, each step carving into the drifts as though willed by something stronger than flesh. For a moment he thought it a shadow, but then she stopped before the barn, and he heard a voice, soft but unshaken. "I ain't broken, sir," the stranger said, snow clinging to her lashes, "but I can clean your barn." The words hung between them, strange as a hymn in a language he almost knew. She was young, perhaps 23, with eyes dark as wet earth, and hair tangled with frost. Her shawl was threadbare, boots cracked, yet her spine stayed straight. It was not a plea she gave him, nor a bargain. It was a statement, both fragile and unyielding. Yuma should have turned her away. Town would talk, and he knew too well how words could slice deeper than any blade. But something in her voice, "I ain't broken," echoed in him like a bell, reminding him of nights when he himself had whispered to the emptiness, daring it to name him finished. "The barn's warm enough," he said at last. His voice sounded harsher than he intended, so he added, quieter, "Do as you say." She moved past him without hesitation, stepping into the hay-scented dark. Lantern light caught the scars on her wrists, faint ridges like rope burns, the kind a body carries for life. Yuma turned away quickly, ashamed of noticing, though the image lingered in him like a wound he had not suffered. She bent to her task immediately, sweeping the floor, calming the restless horses with words too soft for him to catch. He watched as his wild stallion, a creature untamed by any hand, lowered its head beneath her touch. It startled him more than her sudden arrival. Hours passed. She worked with a quiet rhythm, her strength fading but her will unbroken, until finally she took the blanket he offered and climbed to the loft. From below, he heard the rustle of hay, saw her silhouette curl against the cold. He wanted to ask her name, but the silence between them had thickened, and he let it rest. Dawn found her awake before him, sweeping again, shadows beneath her eyes. He set bread on the stall rail and walked away. When he returned later, the bread was gone, and the floor gleamed as if she had polished it with her soul. Days passed, storm-bound. She worked, he watched. Sometimes he left food, sometimes she mended things without being asked. He fixed her broken boot one evening, leaving it by her blanket. She never thanked him aloud, but the next morning, when she brushed his horse, she hummed a tune low and steady, and he knew it was gratitude. Their gestures became language, their silence charged with something unsaid, like a fire banked low but alive. When the storm broke at last, he took her to town for supplies. The air sharpened with whispers the moment they walked into the mercantile. "That's hard with an Indian girl. Shameful. What's he playing at?" Odina, that was her name, he had learned it the night before, kept her eyes down, her shoulders tense. Yuma felt heat rise in his chest, shame not for her but for the venom curling from their mouths. Once, he had bowed beneath their judgment. Not this time. He paid for his goods, lifted his chin, and walked out beside her without a word. As their horses carried them home across the white plain, she finally spoke, voice raw as wind over stone. "I told you I ain't broken. But folk will break me if they can." That night, snow returned fiercer. The ranch house shook, fences vanished under drifts. Supplies grew thin. Odina pushed herself past her strength, hauling, feeding, tending beasts until her body gave out. Yuma caught her as she collapsed in the hay, her skin clammy, her eyes rolling closed. He carried her to the bunk near the fire, laying her gently as though afraid she would vanish. She muttered in her sleep, fragments in English in her own tongue, words of escape, of running from men who treated her like property. He clenched his fists, fury burning in him, but deeper still was awe. She had borne all that, yet still stood, still worked, still claimed she was not broken. In the still hours before dawn, Yuma made his choice. When the storm cleared, he could send her away, keep his name safe, preserve the emptiness he already knew. Or he could stand against the world's scorn and give her what she sought, not pity, not charity, but recognition. When she woke, pale but steady, he saddled 2 horses, packed food, and set her mended shawl over her shoulders. "This ranch is as much yours as mine," he said quietly, meeting her startled eyes, "if you'll stay." She stared at him, as though expecting mockery, but none came. Her lips parted, no words emerging, and instead tears gathered, tears she tried to hide by looking away toward the snow. Later, she stepped outside, the storm's fury easing into a hush of falling flakes. Yuma joined her, standing close enough that his breath mingled with hers. He did not touch her. He did not need to. The silence between them had grown into a promise. The prairie stretched before them, endless and untamed, but for the first time in years, Yuma felt it not as emptiness but as horizon. Odina was not healed. Neither was he. But both had found shelter, not in walls, not in the barn, not even in the fire, but in the dignity of being seen as whole. The days that followed carried the quiet work of rebuilding. She brushed the horses, humming low, and he watched from the doorway, feeling something stir in him that grief had long buried. He did not name it. Neither did she. Some things are stronger when left unnamed. Winter thinned, and spring pressed at the edges of the snow. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the plains, Yuma stood with Odina at the fence line. The horses grazed. The air smelled of thawing earth. He turned to her, not with a question, but with the calm of a man who finally understood. Sometimes the soul does not seek rescue, only witness. Sometimes shelter is not the roof above but the heart beside you. And sometimes, the smallest act, bread left on a rail, a boot mended in silence, a vow spoken without words, can alter the course of a life. The wind stirred her hair, and she looked at him. She did not smile, not fully. But the faint lift at the corner of her lips was enough. The prairie, the barn, the wide sky, they all seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the moment. And so the tale lingers there, at the edge of snow and thaw, with two souls who had weathered storms within and without. Not broken. Not alone. Changed forever by the simple grace of being seen.